Positive Spin, the program that presents positive, innovative, and solution-oriented news from around the world. On today's program, we'll view a profile of Prigi Arisandi, an environmental activist from Indonesia and recipient of the 2011 Goldman Environmental Prize. And we'll visit with prominent San Francisco artist G. Mark Mulleian as he discusses the relevance of his environmental painting, Forces of Man and Nature. And finally, we'll join our associate Bill Miller at the United Nations for his Global Connections television program, focused on the International Criminal Court.
In our first segment, we profile Prigi Arisandi, an environmental activist from Indonesia and recipient of the 2011 Goldman Environmental Prize, the world's largest and most prestigious environmental award. Through his organization, Ekoton, Mr. Arisandi educated and mobilized the people of Surabaya to work to stop the industrial pollution from flowing into the Surabaya River, which is a source of water for more than 3 million people in Indonesia.
Sungai adalah tempat menyenangkan bagi saya.
When I was 10 years old, my father would throw me in the river and I would swim with him, and it was a very happy time in my life. I could see the stones in the sand, and there were plenty of fish and birds and wild animals. But by the time I was 20, I realized the river was filthy. There was so much rubbish and chemical waste in the river that it smelled terrible. There was cadmium, iron, mercury. I couldn't even think about swimming in it like I did as a child. I discovered that there were more than 100 industries dumping waste in the river without treatment.
Prigi Arisandi and his organization Ekoton have implemented a two-part plan to address the urban water pollution problem that is the critical issue throughout Southeast Asia. Prigi's first priority is to reach out to the children who live along the banks of the Surabaya River, which has now reached a crisis level.
Karena sebenarnya juga anak-anak ini adalah korban dari pencemaran.
These children are the real victims of the pollution. Of the people who have cancer in the hospital, 60% are living on the riverbanks, and 90% of those cancer victims are children. So they need to know how to change this terrible situation, so they can help with the solution. That's why I spend so much time teaching them about the issues.
When Prigi isn't teaching, he's likely to be found speaking out against negligent government sanitation policies.
Selama ini kami sangat tergantung dengan.
In our city, Surabaya, we have long been very dependent on the water of the river because it provides more than 96% of our drinking water. Every day, more than 60 tons of human waste are dumped into the waters that are then used for drinking, bathing, and cooking. So our policy is to demand that the government build communal waste management systems to clean up the river from sewage and to stop factories from dumping industrial waste in our river.
Saya percaya ini akan bisa pulih seperti.
I believe that the future will only be better if we do something about it. If we plan better and take action and have a purpose and a goal. We have to challenge the government to do their part. And we have to teach the next generation how to live in harmony with nature. One day, I hope that the river will be clean enough for my daughters to swim in.
For outstanding environmental achievement in islands and island nations, the 2011 Goldman Environmental Prize is awarded to Prigi Arisandi, Surabaya, Indonesia.
In the next segment, we revisit the art of G. Mark Mulleian, who is known for his trans-realistic paintings, depicting a wide range of subject matter through the emotionally charged and powerfully visioned spectrum of his artworks, which convey to the viewer his prophetic messages of potential nuclear catastrophe and environmental disaster. After 37 years, Mulleian has retrieved his 1974 painting entitled Forces of Man and Nature from one of his collectors. Rediscovering the painting's increased relevance in a rapidly warming, species-depleting world. And now let's experience J. Mulleian's 1974 painting, Forces of Man and Nature.
Considering the present world situation, the possibility of a nuclear catastrophe is more apparent than ever before. A Pandora's box has been opened, and now it is up to all of us to close it. This is not a problem that politicians can solve. Our salvation depends on the transforming power of human hearts. Only in the center of our being will we be able to find the guidance necessary to prevent our extinction.
Controversial and always outspoken, G. Mulleian's paintings speak of war and human consciousness. He was instrumental in the cultural clash of combining the multimedia mainstream press and the subculture press of the gay community on an international scale. G. Mulleian has captured the public's imagination for more than 4 decades. He has received extensive press coverage both within and outside of the United States. Today, moving into the 21st century, he is embracing the power of the internet to progress his quest for peace through his amazing website, Mulleian.com, where he is reaching millions worldwide. In 1986, he was presented with an International Art Achievement Award by the Artist Society International, one of the art world's most prestigious awards.
Insightful, mysterious, and controversial, his style is called transrealism, where the artist observes all of the refined elements that our life here on Earth has to offer. The stirring up of conflict is a Luciferian virtue in the true sense of the word, conflict, and engenders fire, the fire of affects and emotions. And like every other fire, it has 2 aspects, that of combustion and that of creating light, writes Carl Jung. Dies Irae, the cornucopia of Mulleian's works, and perhaps the best known. It is also one of the most complex in terms of conception, composition, and symbolic representation, a painting of symphonic dimensions. The image depicts a highly dramatic vision, biblical in scale, of the moment before the end of all moments, the moment before the end of all human sentience, the split second before the chance of choice is gone from human grasp forever. A presence on top of the tree of peace, which rises and descends, flying directly into the blast, compelled by the second, seminal light to receive its calling of guardianship of transformative hope. The belief of American Indians is that the eagle is a messenger sent by the Creator.
What is this welling fury, this roiling of the sea, this turgid, monstrous swelling, this breaking surface of the deep? Could it be Leviathan, fresh sworn from the mouth of hell, boiling, bursting forth in dark dystopian splendor, engorged, ebullient, spewing fiery bile to sear indelibly, an ominous reply to the hubris of mankind? Where once we lived by wit and natural instinct, rooted in harmony and secured within existence as one living instrument among the many, cadenced rhythms of the seasons ruled, and the harmonies of spirit animated all. Like the passion from the hands of a fine violinist, ever so refining of itself, man's voice soared high within the greater whole, a solo bank of strings within symphonic registers. His role? To amplify this wondrous resonance as an echo of the greater natural pulse. But in time, the integrity of our quest for truth has been deformed. Through unthoughtful alliances and short-sighted miscalculations, our world evolves into a monster of our own design. But in so doing, by sheer default, we'll usher in the age of truth. From the beginning, the laws of natural order foresaw the outcome of this metamorphosis. Long before the fishes charted course beneath its surface of the deep, long before man first walked the surface of the earth, subduing, possessing, ordaining himself ruler over all. Now man, bereft of foothold, stumbles to comprehend, bound not to a violin, but to the handle of a pick. No longer an instrument to inspire, discover, nor to build. Instead, a tool to dominate, exploit, and destroy. Professing altruistic, patriotic intent while enacting a predatory pragmatism in the service of self, he becomes a living instrument of self-destruction. No longer free to stake his natural claim to the fullness of human destiny as part of the greater whole, his calloused, lifeless hand gestures this way to what once was. Lying now in wake, unwitting pawn of avaricious force, complicit as a would-be master of the universe, would-be destroyer of the fragile balance of all things, there is no one other than himself to mourn. But long before humanity's aspirations for our greatest human potential begin to fade into obscurity forever, where hope and human consciousness vanish into darkness, nature intervenes to compensate, correct, restore the balance. Now begins her overture, resonating her voice through us, elevating us to a greater perception through the powers of creativity, gateway to the soul. If we acknowledge that we are within the eternal mind of nature, which moves and works through us in sustaining itself, we become an irreversible truth, which frees us from our own enslavement and ultimate distinction. But in the end, this polarizing discord, this war between man and nature, will be settled on nature's terms. For us to see the greater natural order, we must allow nature to see through our eyes. But with circumspection, we must also hear the intrinsic natural harmonies that nature has instilled in us from the beginning. For this to happen, we must listen, but we must also hear equally as much with heart as with mind, and as much with sense as intuition. Hence are the true forces of man and nature.
We are on a collision course. There has never been a time in history in which humanity's misguided aspirations stand in such conflict with our very existence. That existence now hangs in the balance between the forces of man and nature. We must come to understand and appreciate our true purpose, that we can be partners in the creation of a more fully evolved world. To ignore the signs of the times is to risk all.
I'm Michelle Phillips, and you're watching Positive Spin Television, presenting positive, innovative, and solution-oriented news from around the world.
Positive Spin is now pleased to present Ronnie Ray Padilla and his music video Setting Birds Free from his debut album, Raydience.
Uncle Arthur passed away the other day, and then we said goodbye to him. He taught me how to fish, love the birds and trees, and kind of be an Indian in the city. But now he's standing on a mountain top. He's setting many birds go free. And we know that he had love for you and you. I heard many dreams when I was young, and now they're all coming true. I see myself from the inside out, wanted to be true to you, yeah, yeah, yeah. But now, we're all standing near a mountain top, and we're not quite ready to set many birds go free, and we know that we have love for you and you. Passed away the other day, and then we said goodbye to her. She taught me how to be nice, be true to myself and you. Yeah, yeah, yeah. But now she's standing on a mountain top with her hair flowing. She's setting many birds go free, yeah, yeah. And we know that she had love for you and me. Oh no, yeah, oh no, hey, yeah, no, yeah, yeah, oh yeah, near a mountain top, and we're not quite ready to set many birds go free, and we know that we have love for you and you.
In our final segment, we join our associate Bill Miller of Global Connections Television at the UN Television Studios in New York City, where he will conduct an interview concerning the International Criminal Court.
Welcome to today's Global Connections program. I'm Bill Miller. What is exactly the United Nations International Criminal Court? What role can the International Criminal Court play to make sure that there's not a rerun of a genocide that took place in Rwanda, or perhaps the Holocaust that took place prior to and during World War II? Also, what actions by the International Criminal Court might impact people in the United States and people around the world? We'll be back in just a moment to talk about these and other hot button. Today, we're talking about the International Criminal Court on Global Connections Television. My guest is someone who's extremely knowledgeable of the International Criminal Court, commonly called ICC. Mr. John Washburn is the convener of the American Non-Governmental Organizations Coalition on the International Criminal Court. Mr. Washburn was a senior United Nations official for 6 years. From 1963 until 1987, he served as a United States diplomat. John Washburn, welcome to today's Global Connections program.
Well, thank you, Bill. It's great to be back.
Appreciate you being back. This is about the third or fourth program we've done, I think, over the past several years.
That's right.
The International Criminal Court, extremely important entity that was created by the United Nations. The UN doesn't run it today. We'll get into that in a moment. But let's talk a little bit. I know many of our viewers have heard of the International Criminal Court, but they also have heard of the World Court, which is the International Court of Justice, and the temporary tribunals, the ad hoc tribunals. Could you very briefly just give us a little bit of a differentiation and explanation? What is the International Criminal Court versus the Court of Justice, the World Court, and the temporary tribunals?
Sure. The International Criminal Court tries individual human beings for the very worst possible atrocity crimes. The International Court of Justice, commonly called the World Court, deals basically with disputes between states, between nations. The International Criminal Court was created by a treaty which was negotiated at the direction and under the authorization of the General Assembly, and it constitutes, as you indicated, a major United Nations success story. The International Court of Justice is part of the UN, and its charter is part of the UN Charter.
Let's focus on the International Criminal Court for a moment. Could you give us just a brief historical overview? How did it get developed? It was the Rome Treaty that basically established it. And as I recall, a lot of people projected that it would take 15, 20, 30 years to get the countries of the world united behind this type of court. And all of a sudden, within about a 2 or 3 year period, it seemed like everybody was getting on the bandwagon, and it became very popular and it has moved forward very quickly. How did, let's go back to the Rome Treaty, how it started and how, how the progress took place.
We actually have to go back a little bit further to that, to 1994, when the General Assembly decided to take a look at whether you could negotiate a treaty like this. And they got together and examined the issue, and they discovered that if you held its jurisdiction to these 3 categories of crimes, that you had a common ground, a footprint on which you could build an agreed court. Lots of times you're negotiating a treaty, people make long speeches about why are we doing this and what's the point of it. That didn't happen here. We discovered that nobody wanted to get up and say, why do we have to take action against genocide? So you had a common ground among all kinds of countries, 189 countries. 160 countries stuck with the negotiations all the way through. So flash forward, we had negotiations under the aegis that were authorized by the General Assembly and carried out by committees created by the General Assembly. And then we had a diplomatic conference in Rome in 1998, and out of this came the Rome Statute. It required 60 signatures, 60 ratifications, which is a lot. And as you say, a lot of people figured we're not going to get this for 20, 30 years. Instead, because of the atrocities that have kept on happening ever since the end of the Second World War, people wanted this court, countries wanted this court, and by 2002, only 4 years, we had enough ratifications to bring the court into existence.
What are some of the major concerns that the United States had? Obviously, the countries that have not signed on all expressed some concerns, and even many of the countries who have signed on probably have expressed some concerns. But what are the major ones? We'll just use the U.S. as an example. What problems did they see with the International Criminal Court?
Okay, well, there have been, for both the Clinton administration and the Bush administration, the concern of the military that somehow the court would be used to politically abuse soldiers, to bring cases against Americans for basically political motives, not legal ones. There was a great deal of concern about the fact that if an American goes to another country that belongs to the court and commits an atrocity there, that other court can send him to the court if it so desires. I think those were the basic concerns. Then attached to that, and particularly important during the Bush administration, were other issues that were more matters of ideology or concepts about the United States, having to do with ideas about sovereignty, having to do with the notion that as a superpower we should be given exceptional slack and room for maneuver in the international community, the notion that Americans ought not to be subject to legal systems other than their own, and that kind of thing.
Well, you're watching Global Connections Television, and the main purpose of Global Connections Television is to focus attention on international issues that impact people from Frankfort, Kentucky to Frankfurt, Germany, and from Lima, Ohio to Lima, Peru. But we also try to take a look at the United Nations to see what role the UN can play in dealing with many, if not all, of these international problems.
So I'm Max Gail, and I get to talk about Peace Day, so I want to share one of my song lyrics, which is called The Love of Self, and it goes, the love of self, sacred self, lead us from that selfish shelf to look for love that lets us look around, put both feet back on the ground, make a joyful, loving sound, because balance we have found is more than not falling over. Amen. And luck is more than a four-leaf clover again. And peace is found in peaceful states of mind, greeting true hearts beating through those tests of time, from what we truly seek to what we truly find, through the valleys to the mountains that we climb. But we won't find peace of mind leaving our old hearts behind. We pray for peace that lets our hearts be true to the things we're here to do. See it clear, see it through. Have no fear to learn anew. The truth is more of the mystery. And life is more than the horror of history. And peace is found in peaceful states of mind, greeting true hearts, beating through those tests of time, from what we truly seek to what we truly find, through the valleys to the mountains that we climb. It's so much more than putting words in rhyme.
Well, that's our show for today. We hope this program has inspired you to take action in your local community to create a better world. I'm Bill McCarthy, and I want to remind you that everyone can make a difference. Go out and make some positive news.